Welcome to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and I'm going to introduce you to the creators who give fear its voice. Together, we'll explore the strange, the unsettling, and the unforgettable. So go ahead and dim those lights because that conversation starts now. Hello and welcome to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton. Today I am joined by poet, essayist, and artist, Zefyr Lisowski. And she's here to talk about her latest book, Uncanny Valley Girls. It's part memoir, it's part film critique, and it's part horror love letter. And this collection dives into the movies we watch and how they shape our lives. So Zefyr, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. My cat is making a cameo on screen right now, but I'm so happy to be here.
What's your cat's name, huh?
Her name is Gethsemane. I was going through a reclaiming Catholicism period, as I talk about in the book, and I got her right in the middle of that.
I love it. It's fantastic. Hi, how are you? Feel free to hang out. We're four-leg friendly here. It's all good. So, Zefyr, let's start with probably the most basic and hardest question you'll have to answer all day. Tell us what this book is about.
Of course. So, Uncanny Valley Girls is a combination essay collection, memoir, and work of film criticism about horror movies and about intimacy specifically. It's using horror to think about exes, using it to think about connection between others, and the things that scare us about intimacy and care with others as explored through the movies that scare us as well.
I love it. I mean, like I said, once I started reading it, I could not put it down. It really just was, like you said, it's very intimate, it's very personal, and I just was blown away by it. So, well done. So I do want to sort of talk about a few things, and you sort of start the book out with this. At 27, you found yourself, in a psych ward, and you talk about how horror films sort of became your tether, and it made me wonder, what was the first film that you turned to that felt like it was a lifeline, and why was it so important? Why was it so urgent in that moment for you?
That's a really good question. I think the first film that I ever remember deeply attaching to was The Wolfman, the 1941 movie, starring Lon Chaney Jr. And there's something about, like a lot of fans of horror, I was an anxious kid. I had a lot of sort of fears and lots of things circling around my life that I couldn't quite understand. And horror became this way to kind of explore and engage with those fears. And especially older black and white horror movies, because they're so kind of melancholic and sepulchral and have this out of time quality that being 70, 80 years old has given them at this point, really became an entry point when a lot of more contemporary horror was still too intense for me at the time. So I've really connected with that. And there's such a melancholy in the old Universal monster movies as well that deeply spoke to me, too.
You talked about Wolfman in the book, and you reframed it for me in a way that now I have to go. Like, I put it on my schedule to watch this weekend. I'm like, I have to go back and watch it now with a new set of eyes. So I thought it was a very interesting sort of POV that you provided with that. And so I'm going to do this. This is a quote, but you're going to find me quoting your book. I've got so many. There's so many great moments that you put in this book. But you describe your relationship with horror as, first I loved them, and then I loved myself. And I think that is such a great statement. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think that mirror kind of shifted for you and where loving the genre became a path to finding a way to love yourself.
Of course, that's a really great question. For me, one of the moments of shift actually happened with the movie that I talk about having a more vexed relationship, which is 2002's The Ring, the American remake. And that was a film that terrified me like it did a lot of people when it came out. I don't think that's an especially unique experience. Especially if you're a child watching it, it's a very frightening movie. But I think through that terror, it sort of became an obsession. And it wasn't until I began to really break down what was so frightening about that movie to me, which is fundamentally a movie about a girl who is told that she's evil, told that she's bad, in part because she doesn't assign or align with the norms of conventional society, and then she's punished for that. And I think once I was able to flip that switch and see the movie in terms of a societal punishment of the abnormal or the queer or the atypical, that became an entry point for me to practice more compassion in my own life as well. And that continued through a bunch of other things. I also talk about in the book my experience with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was kind of paradoxically a film that really helped me embrace being a Southerner, which is something that I had a lot of resistance to. So there are all of these points where I was able to find these connections to my own experience, and in part because I was engaging with these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of dread, these feelings of otherness. Horror was able to allow me to not invalidate those feelings, but find the spaces in between them where I could exist as well.
I love it. I want to talk about your horror library in the book, but I'm going to do a little sidestep real quick because you mentioned being Southern, and I'm also from North Carolina. I knew you're
Oh.
from North Carolina, so I'm actually from Mount Airy, which is on the other side of the state, I think, from where you were, but from one North Carolinian to another, I'd say
Yeah.
hello and adieu.
Incredible. I clocked the accent. That's really exciting. North Carolina is such a specific state. It's such a specific experience growing up there.
It indeed is, and I don't know. I just couldn't get out of there fast enough. I was like, okay. I think you wrote about it in the book too, but I like for me I'm in California. I'm in Los Angeles, and I could not get here fast enough. I needed out of the small town. I knew coming to the big city was going to be the thing that changes you, right? And it comes to find out, as you say, I won't spoil it. You may have to stop me from doing spoilers from time to time, but you talk about what that experience was for you and how it changed your perceptions, and I could totally relate to all of that. So,
Well, thank
growing
you.
up queer in the South is very hard. We'll say that. So. But now I want to talk about your horror library because let me tell you, you have the movies you reference in this book. I mean, it's everything from cult classics to some very unexpected deep cuts. I was seriously fucking impressed. I was like, I mean, I love horror movies and have loved them for a very long time, but there's things on here I haven't seen, and I was making notes. So I was like, kudos. I love your love of horror.
Thank you.
And I'm kind of curious, like, with that sort of that knowledge and that sort of experience with horror, when you're writing, do these films, how do they work for you? Do they serve more as companions, or are they more like sparring partners, or is it something completely different? How
Well,
do they inspire you?
that's a really great question as well. The initial approach to the book was pairing movies with the people I watched those movies with, because despite loving horror, I get scared quite easily, and it's kind of difficult for me to watch horror movies alone, unless they're films like Scream, for instance, that are kind of through tone and through repetition of viewing have kind of become defanged, so to speak. Although I love Scream quite a bit, despite my critiques of it. So I think that initially the plan was to think about horror movies relationally with other people, but it sort of evolved from there into thinking of these larger connections and these larger themes of pathologization and otherness, of course, and also care, and finding these movies that practice care in one way or another. So, for instance, Dark Water, 2002 Japanese movie, directed by Hideo Nakata, which is one of the films I talk about, is a film about the complexities of being a mother and the complexities of feeling like you can't live up to the care that you practice. And that's not even something that I engage as directly with in the book, but I want there to still be the kind of shadow of those themes throughout the book. I want there to be the ways in which these movies are selected, all kind of centering around a series of themes that, even if they're unstated, are still perhaps present for people who are familiar with the genre.
It's great, and you talked about this. You just mentioned Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and also Saint Maud. And you sort of weave that commentary into your story here. I'm just wondering, as I was reading through, I was like, was there a film that made you stop and rethink your own narrative, like something that made you say, "Oh, you know what? I totally see that about myself that you didn't quite realize before the film came along."
That's also a really phenomenal question. Maybe this is a bit of a cop-out, but each of these films that I write about, I had some sort of transformative relationship with, I would say. Saint Maud was a movie that I sort of embraced at a certain specific time in my life that was marked by a lot of instability and marked by a lot of fear and psychic anguish and also this intimacy as well. And I think since you brought up that movie, that's a really great example of something that, as I've revisited it, as I've sort of continued writing, there has been a change in approach. I started writing this essay, which also compares St. Maud to the philosophy of Simone Weil, who was a sort of quasi-Catholic mystic in the early 20th century and philosopher. And I was watching St. Maud at a time where I was really engaged with Weil's work. And I initially was like, oh, this is so exciting. This is a movie that's kind of embracing her philosophy, which is very much finding grace through pain, finding salvation through pain. And Maud, the main character of St. Maud, says, never waste your pain, several times throughout the movie. But by the end of the film, it sort of becomes this repudiation of that worldview. And as I watched it, and as I've rewatched it, both in writing the book and just also in showing it to other people who I care about, that perspective and that relationship to the movie changed as well. There are so many other examples that I can bring up as well, but that's the one that most immediately comes to mind.
That was great. One of the essays that you wrote that really kind of stuck with me was the one about the werewolf girl. And for a lot of reasons, but it just felt like such a potent metaphor for transformation, which I think you even at one point said it can be both liberating and terrifying at the same time. And I wonder if I really felt it came off the page, the connection with the werewolf girl. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what drew you to that figure and how ideas of change and becoming sort of run through this book.
Of course. So one thing that I talk about in that essay is that werewolves have always been an obsession of mine. I have the second tattoo I ever got was this woodcut of a werewolf. It takes up my entire thigh. It's something that I've kind of returned to again and again. Like I said, the first movie that I really felt seen by in some ways was The Wolfman. And this germination of that essay in the collection was starting to figure out what about this is so specific and so entrancing to me. And there are a number of different sort of answers to that. One of those is, as a trans woman, thinking about the idea of transformation being central to the werewolf story, thinking about the ways in which transformation can be both volitional and can be almost existential, right? Something that sort of happens that you feel like you don't even have a choice in, was really moving to me. And then also, I think part of it was coming from a frustration as well with the larger cultural representations of werewolves, which are often playing second fiddle to vampires. There's the whole Twilight thing, or they're just sort of depicted as someone who really enjoys what's happening. And I think if you really think about it, and think about a lot of the kind of canonical texts around werewolves, both The Wolfman and American Werewolf in London are two examples that really come to mind. It's a sort of excruciating process, and it's an excruciating life, and it's one kind of overdetermined by guilt and by fear, and by trying to prevent something from happening that is existentially unpreventable. And sort of thinking about that sort of laid the foundations for this essay. And then from there, I was curious, if you do have this sort of unpreventable force, what does it mean to find community in that anyway? What does it mean to accept that? And what does that acceptance look like without shortchanging any of the harm that's done through the change or through things that surround the change as well?
Very thought-provoking essay. Like I said, they're all great, but that one just really kind of jumped out to me. I don't know if this one's a spoiler because it's towards the end of the book. If you'd rather me take it out, just say so, and I'm happy to edit it out. But I did notice that you mentioned that these essays had started taking shape during your relationship with Vespertine. I think you've named in the book. I'm kind of curious, like, how in that moment, what was the spark that eventually became this book, and how much of it carried through in this coming to life?
Of course. I've always been really, and I'm happy to talk about this, I've always been really excited by writing that draws from the author's personal life. One of the epigraphs of the book is from Marjorie Kemp by the new narrative writer Robert Gluck, which is a book that's sort of counterposing. My cat's making a more primary appearance right now, but Marjorie Kemp is this book that counterposes the author's own kind of torturous affair with the story of Marjorie Kemp, who was a pseudo-saint in the Middle Ages. And I'm really interested in these ways in which we write our lives and write our lives into work, and the overlay between art and life, not just in the kind of narcissistic, I'm turning everything into a story way, but also just thinking about how we can use both as mechanisms for change. And as I sort of had that idea, I was really invested in sort of recording a document of this relationship that felt really involved and felt really consumptive, and these ways that weren't entirely healthy. And once I started capturing that, the rest of the book kind of clicked. The essay that Vespertine is in kind of became the code to start thinking about the rest of the book, and sort of became a scaffolding engine that the book became built around.
Love it. It's great. So all of your essays tend to trace along, I'd say, class, disability, horror, and it does it in such sharp and such, poignant ways that really are very impactful and very touching to me. And I also feel like it's probably mostly because it's deeply rooted in your own history, right? And growing up and sort of moving through all these different geographies, like going from city to city and things like that, and eventually claiming your own trans identity. I'm curious how those shifts, both in location and in self, how those sort of shape how this book came together.
That's a great question as well. It's a really migratory book. It starts chronologically in the Virgin Islands, which is where I was born. It has a brief interlude in Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, and the majority of it is set in North Carolina, although there is a kind of cross-coastal interlude in California as well, which is partially where the title of the book comes from. And I was really interested in the ways in which regionalism can provide us a lens to think more universally, and the way in which it can kind of foreclose a larger connection. The essay about California and about Los Angeles is really trying to collapse the difference between this idea of California as this kind of unique place, whereas these same dynamics of ableism, of classism, of racism pervade across the United States and across the world. And thinking about these ways in which these locations are both very specific and very linked to specific moments in my life, and also are all kind of repeating the same kinds of complexes, the same kinds of dynamics, not unlike a horror movie kind of has this cyclical nature of repetition as well, is something that I was really interested in capturing in the book.
All right. I would love to know what was the most surprising, whether that could be emotional or it could be cultural, teaching moment you found while, let's just say, while watching horror in your most vulnerable moments, which you talk about quite a bit in the book. I'd love to know what was surprising to you in that regard, and how did that come across in the essays?
I think that what was the most surprising to me was realizing, maybe this is a bit of a cop-out, but I think what really was the most surprising to me was realizing that I didn't care for the movie Black Swan at all. It was a film...
Oh my god, I'm so glad you said that, because I didn't either. I was like, everyone wants to love this movie, but just wasn't feeling it, so I tried.
No. Same. It was a movie that was like really tied up with a specific moment in my life. And I was like, oh, this is so great. This is such a phenomenal movie. And then I rewatched it, and I found the performances flat and the sort of kind of gimmicky in a way, but like gleaned over with this patina of self-seriousness that I really was not into. So I think kind of discovering these moments how subjective a viewing experience can be was really something that surprised me as I was watching these, how much whether or not I care for a movie, whether or not anyone cares for a movie, is so tied up in the circumstances that surround that movie as well. It was
I
a
know.
really surprising revelation.
1000%. I mean, I've got movies that, I think back on like a movie that I loved growing up that I come back to now and it reminds me of a certain time or place that I was in. And I'm like, I'm not such a fan of it anymore because it's bringing back too much of too much emotion and too much memory around that. I don't know if I'm saying it as well as you did, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So, I'm going to go back to another quote because I have, like I said, I have quite a few. But one of my favorite quotes, and it is something, I think it was fairly early in the book, but it's like, now I wonder how much the things that scare us are always trying to form their own community. I thought, and that was pretty early on, and that's one of the first time I put the book down and I wrote this down because I was like, that is a fucking powerful sentence. I mean, that is just really great. And I loved it, and it just made me wonder, is there a moment in this collection that you are most proud of? That whether that be a quote or an essay or anything like that? Because this was a stop and think moment for me.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that resonate with you. Yeah, I think that in terms of things that I'm the most proud of, I we mentioned the werewolf essay. I'm really proud of the work that I did in that essay. I think that that's something that I kind of feel comfortable resting on my laurels for, and like holding the nuance of all of that. But also, a lot of this book is about a personal journey of healing while realizing that healing isn't a point A to point B journey. It's something that's cyclical and recurring. And to that end, the ending of the book, which sort of has this chorus of X's and this kind of address to all of them, was something that I felt really satisfied with when I was able to kind of crack it, so to speak.
I think I saw a social post of yours on Instagram where you were talking about the book, and you were like, "Do you have a problem with your exes from your past?" I don't remember the specific. And I was like, "Yep, that's me. I got a line of them for sure." So,
Yeah.
so converse to that, is there something that you're kind of nervous to have out there when the book comes out on October 7th?
Well, I think more broadly, it is, as you've noticed, an extraordinarily vulnerable book. It's incredibly intimate. And I think in a lot of ways, especially when writing nonfiction, it's kind of easy to be, but with all sorts of writing, it's easy to be in your little vacuum and kind of assume that just the people you're going to show it to are going to read this. And otherwise, it's sort of a private, kind of almost diary-like practice. And that was something that I deliberately cultivated. I wanted there to be a tremendous amount of intimacy in the book. But because of that, now it's starting to sink into me that people who I don't know, who are in many cases very adroit and very like gifted and generous readers, such as yourself, are going to be engaging with this. And that strikes a little bit of fear into my heart.
I would have thought that there would be a little bit because, like you said, it does get very personal and very intimate. I hope this is a raging success because I think it's just great. Like I said, I connected with it immediately, and I choose to believe that the rest of the world too will too when it comes out. So,
Well, thank you.
so what are you most excited to explore next? Whether that is artistically or as a writer or just emotionally, what's next on the list for you?
I'm actually working on a novel right now, which is really exciting, kind of to put, it's a horror novel. It's sort of werewolf body horror. It's kind of putting into practice the theory of the werewolf chapter, actually. And
I'm excited.
it's really exciting to work on. I feel really energized by what's turning out on the page.
Fantastic. So, when's that coming?
TBD. I'm talking with my agent about it right now, but there's some tentative interest, which is exciting to see.
Is it done though, or are you still writing? Are you still in the drafting phases?
I finished a draft of it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Great. I'll stop pressing. I promise. So, before we wrap up, I want to end with one more quote that you wrote in your book. This one just kind of resonated for me too, and I think it's a great way to sort of wrap things up. And that quote is, "People should be allowed to change for whatever reasons possible. It's in the changing that we get a chance to live." and that is just beautiful. So that is fantastic. So
Oh,
I
thank
love
you
this book
again.
so damn much. It's really great, and I can't wait to see how it goes and how everything goes with you. But the book is called Uncanny Valley Girls. It's available everywhere October 7th, and like we always say here at Quills and Chills, please support your local bookstores whenever possible. So, so
Thank you
Zephyr,
so
how
much.
can our audience find you online and on social?
That's a great question. So my website is Zefyr Lisowski, one word, .com. And I also am on Instagram at ZEFRRR, and I believe there are 17 R's, but if you keep typing, eventually I'll pop up. There are too many competitive accounts at this current juncture.
I'll get that on screen. I'll get the actual thing on screen, and I'll have it in the show notes and everything as well. So it'll all be there. So.
Sounds great.
Well, my God, it's been an absolute delight talking to you today, and thank you so much for this book. Like I said, it was really, really hard to put down, very inspiring and very powerful. So, thank you, and we'll talk to you guys later. See you next time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.